Good morning and happy Friday. For those of you that are new, welcome. And for those of you that are returning, welcome back to the Torque and Thrust Talk Show, episode number 29, Spacecraft by Temu. My name is Bill, and I've been an airline pilot for the past 7.5 years. I hold 5 FAA type ratings and currently fly the Boeing 737 for a major U.S. airline. My co host is fellow co founder of the Three Green Simulations Group, retired New York City EMT and flight sim extraordinaire, Tommy D of Level Flight Simulations. On this week's show, we are talking about the two Delta aircraft that collided on the ground in Atlanta, some gaming updates from Tommy D, and the Motor Trend top half-ton pickup trucks for 2024. Then we'll learn industry terms with jargon in a jiffy, learn from past accidents with safety stand down, some live listener Q&A in our discussion this week, Spacecraft by Temu. Should spacecraft manufacturing and development be done by third-party companies? Tommy D, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, doing well. How about yourself?
I am doing good. Been kind of a busy past couple of days with family events, and last night Tommy actually joined us. I was streaming with a new stream partner named Elegance. We had a great time, except I was an idiot, and I was just telling Tommy I isolated his voice and the audio that I wanted from my VOD completely out of the recording. So the recording is just me laughing and talking to myself for about 2 hours. So other than that, it's been really good. Just begin. It's rainy here, so once again, it's storming here. So if for whatever reason the broadcast gets cut short, we know why. That's once again from my side. What about you? What's going on with you, Tommy D?
I've just really been working. That I've Today is day 6 of 6. A lot going on, a lot of things just compounding, and naturally, why wouldn't they all of our deadlines at the very end start to merge? So,
Yeah,
and we lost a couple people in my department. They transferred to different buildings because our building is just that busy
yeah.
already.
Well, and this is the new facility, right?
This is a new one, and we're not even
Okay.
at half staff yet. We just
So
passed the quarter mark with numbers per shift.
good. Okay. Dang. Yeah. So you guys are busy just in time for the busy season too.
Yeah,
It's gonna
yeah,
be it's gonna
that's
be
gonna be
hectic.
blast.
Yeah, I would say that's gonna be super hectic. Well, hopefully it's not too hectic, but I mean, we'll hear more obviously as we do more episodes coming up here in the near future. But with that, I'm going ahead and start today's news segment with some. I almost said jargon in a jiffy. It is early in the morning, folks, so I do apologize. We're going to do some aviation news, and this is something that's been breaking news for a couple days now. On September 10th, 2024, two Delta airplanes collided on the taxiway at Atlanta, Georgia, and this is from the NASDAQ.com website in terms of news source. Obviously, right now it is early on, so we don't know entirely what was going on. We know it was a clear, beautiful day, and there's obviously videos out there circulating on social media of the A350 hitting the CRJ 900. But as of right now, officials are investigating a taxiway collision between a Delta A350 and an Endeavor Air CRJ 900 aircraft. The incident occurred shortly after 10 a.m. on September 10th when the Japan-bound A350 Delta 295 struck the CRJ 900, which was Endeavor 5526 heading to Louisiana while taxiing. The A350 had 221 passengers on board, while the CRJ 900 had 56 passengers. And miraculously, there were no injuries to be reported between the two aircraft. The FAA announced that it is going to be doing an investigation as well, in addition to the NTSB investigation. Obviously, there was major aircraft damage, so the NTSB has to get involved, but the FAA is also running its own investigation. I'm gonna bring Tommy back in on this real quick. Aviation news, unfortunately, is short today, but that's because we don't have a whole lot of information in terms of what's going on with it. So, what are your thoughts, Tommy D? When you first did you hear about that, the Atlanta collision?
Oh, who hasn't? That
Yeah,
that's
it's
that's about the story number 2 behind the presidential
debate.
races. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Look, keep your pets closer, folks. In Springfield, Ohio. Be careful. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And when I run in 2028, it won't be like that, I promise. But
I,
um, I'm like you. I'm waiting for more information, a little bit more along the lines of the investigation. Because what actually happened? Like, did that CRJ wind up someplace it wasn't supposed to? Like,
well,
and
I
not for
think
nothing, that
every
350 is not exactly small.
I
So
I think 100% everybody was where they were supposed to, because the CRJ was holding short of 8 right for departure. So they're holding short. That's where they're supposed to be. Um, it depending on the person taxing, like the captain. I've seen people park. And it's not just the regional guys. I've seen mainline guys do it too, where they park a whole 737 length away from the whole short line. I always snuggled up, is what I call it, when I was a captain at Envoy, especially in a 145. I snuggled up right up to the whole short line because I knew there was, big airplanes trying to get behind me. But I think the bottom line, what it comes down to is not really who has right of way, but the CRJ facing the runway where he's supposed to be, right? And there was recordings on live ATC from the Delta pilot saying, "Hey, we did what we were supposed to do. We were on center line, basically checking all the boxes to try to be like, hey, this isn't our fault." But ultimately, it's the taxiing crews, so the A350's crew's responsibility to be looking out the window and seeing. And here's the thing though, here's another kind of conundrum, especially with airplanes getting as big as they are today. The A350, like in the 737, I really have to lean over and press my face against the windshield, or the especially on a 900 ER and 9 max, to be able to see the wingtip, right? Because it's so far back. So on an A350, I've never been on an A350 or a wide body, so I don't know how easy it is to see the wingtip, especially in a big flight deck. But like in our manuals, and if we have it at my company, I'm sure Delta has it in their company. We call it taxi geometry. It's a picture, visual depiction in our manuals with line of sight for both the captain and first officer, and it tells you the important like parts of the airplane. So, for example, the bottom or the wingtip, right, is through the middle of my window, my right side window. So if it's any lower than halfway down my right side window, I know it's going to hit the wingtip. So if it's inside that area, there's a possibility it's going to hit the wingtip. And at the wingtip, the wing is probably maybe 15 feet or something like that off the ground. It's not too far, but I can't reach up really and touch it. So if anything's taller than 15 feet within that range, I know to either hit the brakes or tell the captain to stop. Um, but the same thing. And then there's like the main ones are nose wheel, main wheels, engines because they hang underneath the wing, and then wingtips. Those are the different sight lines that we know to make sure that we're not taxiing to anything. But I think
right.
ultimately there was no way the CRJ could have known. I think the CRJ was where they were supposed to be. So I do think the fault will lie and end up on the A350 crew, just because of the fact that no matter how small or big the aircraft, there was no way for the CRJ to be like, "Oh, I'm in the way of the A350," because the A350 is behind us. And if it's one thing that airplanes don't have is a rear view mirror, unfortunately, so we can't see behind us. So the A350 crew, they may not have noticed that or couldn't see the wingtip, but as an FO, I'd be, because it was the right side. It was, of course, it was the FO side that got dinged, but I'd be pressing my forehead up against the glass to see. And if it was just even if I had any doubt, I would have stopped the airplane and said, "Hey, tower, I don't think I can get past this RJ." Because you got to know your
Yeah.
A350 is a big airplane. Like, you're taxing that behemoth around. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not trying to, what's it called? Bad armchair quarterback the Delta crew, because it's a sucky situation to hit anything in an airplane. Um, and especially if you're on center line, you think you're clearing something and then you run into something, it's not a good feeling. It's just one of those things. It does fall on the Delta crew in that scenario. And it would have been the same thing if it was swapped around. Let's say a CRJ was on that taxiway and hit a smaller airplane. It is still the responsibility of the taxi crew who's going past the aircraft to make sure that they're clear, because that RJ couldn't go anywhere. It was holding short of a
No,
runway.
it was kind of just stuck there. Yeah, just
Yeah, it
waiting to
couldn't.
go.
Yeah, and like I said, push comes to come, you hit the brakes and you say, "Atlanta, I can't. I'm not sure if I can get past this. Either can we get a truck out here to clear us, or wait until the RJ departs, or ask if the RJ can move up." Because sometimes if you tell them to move up, they can.
Right.
American Airlines loves to block the taxiways on O'Hare when they're trying to taxi on the ramp, because they'll sit there with their tails hanging out of the taxiway. So you just type in the ramp frequency and be like, "Hey, American, can you pull in a little bit more? Can you
Mm.
get out of the way?" So, but yeah, we'll keep it up to date. I think it's this one's gonna be cut and dry. I don't think there's anything drastic. The only thing that think might be an issue is because obviously they're gonna pull tapes and stuff. Is might be sterile cockpit to see how focused the A350 crew was, and since they were going to Japan, there might have been 4 people on the flight deck because the relief pilots are required to be on the flight deck during takeoff and landing. So
Right.
it's a very distinct possibility there was 4 of them up there, and the fact that they hit something with 4 of them on board might be the issue. Stereo cockpit might be an issue. So we'll see where that. I think that's where that's going to lead. But other than that, I think it's clear cut and dry. The A350 crew unfortunately didn't clear their wingtip and just slammed into the CRJ. I'm just glad that everybody's okay on the CRJ because there's a video out there of a A380 hitting a Air France 145 and completely spinning that thing 360 degrees, and that has some not severe but some minor injuries associated with this. This one, the tail just knocked over and just the airplane was
Yeah,
fine.
it looks like right at the, attach points, right at the empennage
Yeah,
there, just
just
folded it.
right off. So, I mean, and the airplane didn't move, and that's and as long and people, I don't know how to say this to you, wear your seat belts. That's what that's
Right?
for. Every time I commute, when I land, you hear people go, you can hear them, and I'm just, and you can see the flight attendant sitting in the jump seat going, and she usually they look at me and I just smile and like I don't know what to tell you, like, but that's why. Because if you do get hit by an airplane on a taxiway and you get spun around out of your seat and you bang your head into the metal seat next to you, well, guess what? You weren't wearing your seatbelt. That's on you. So it's just like if you're driving, a lot of times we taxi around like 30 knots, which is roughly about 35 miles an hour. Right. So that's just like driving a car. If you're in a collision in a car at 35 miles an hour, you want to wear your seatbelt.
Yeah,
So, like,
yeah.
I don't understand this mentality of, "Oh, let's land and then rip off our seatbelts, folks."
Oh,
We're
because
still
they're gonna be the
moving.
first one in the door to get off.
Oh my
Now,
god,
I'm
yeah, I
way
just
in the back by the, F
uh,
restroom, but I'm gonna be the first one out the door.
I'm gonna be the first one. I'm better than first class. So, no, so once again, people just wear your seatbelts. That's kind of the huge takeaway for this one is just wear your freaking seatbelt.
Yeah,
Alright,
if
so
only there was a sign or something in the aircraft about that.
ding doo. Yeah, exactly. Alright, Tommy, why don't you take it away with your gaming update today?
Sure, this is also you might as well stay on camera, it's gonna be kinda short. I bullet pointed it. So, what I'm talking about today is actually an NBC News article, and this is it affects a reoccurring conversation you and I have had over the past year, even not anything to do with the talk show. Video game
Mm.
performance announced a strike citing AI concerns.
Oh.
So the union that covers the actors and the voiceover actors for video games, believe it or not, they're in SAG, the Studio Actors Guild out
Oh,
there
that
in
makes
LA.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this has been ongoing for about 2 years. I don't know how this article has flown under the radar in any of the gaming news, but
Mhm.
there are 25 proposals by the actors union to go ahead and offer some type of protection for the actors themselves against AI, because it started to slowly but surely leak out that the companies have been using AI to dub the actors' voices. So
Oh,
the
that's not
actors
good.
are like, "Oh, nay, nay. Well, we're not doing this." This actually started back in 2022, and this is still reoccurring with every one of their contract negotiations. So
So
and this article was actually in July.
wait a
So
minute. So, no I'm sorry, I'll let you finish. But I have a question about that because that's kind of a
go ahead,
weird.
shoot now because I mistakenly minimized my bullet points.
Okay, it's so but here's the thing, your voice uh, uh, okay, so how
Is
does that
your
work with
voice.
copyright? Well, but here's the thing, because a lot of actors will have, like, likeness clauses where they can't use their likeness without their permission. That includes stuff like, in the latest Star Wars, when they brought back Carrie Fisher
Mhm.
and put her face on an actress because Carrie Fisher's passed away. So, it's one of those things, and James Earl Jones, my man,
That is
that's
still heartbreaking,
oh,
isn't
that
it?
sucked. God, that sucked. My wife's like, "Who's that?"
Mm.
Mufasa, Darth Vader. God, he's the man from Sandlot. He's the
The blind
Otis's
neighbor with
blind
Hercules.
neighbor. Hercules. Yeah, there you go. I mean, absolute legend. He was also in Field of Dreams. He didn't
Yes.
play Shoeless Joe Jackson. That was Ray Liotta, but that's he was a big part of
Terrence
That
Mann,
kept
the,
Terrence Mann. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
depicted as a famous writer in the '60s, like a controversial writer.
Yeah, exactly. And it was Kevin Costner, right?
Yeah,
With
yeah.
yeah, Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams. Love that movie. But yeah, so they can't recreate their likeness in terms of visual, but I don't know if that covers
Now, interesting enough
their,
enough, I knew that too, but there's nothing in that article about that, about likeness rights or anything
yeah.
for that. And, uh, get this, you're not gonna believe the number. This floored me when I read it last night because I was essentially just stuck at my desk all night long, so I had your stream going on one side, and I was reading this, and then my work on a different screen. The union represents 160,000 actors. I was like, "Wow, that's a lot for, like, voiceover work,"
That
and
is a lot,
now
yeah.
when they're saying the animation work, the people who dress up in those,
The
spandex
captures.
suits against the green
Yeah.
screen with all the sensors,
Yeah.
they're covered as well, and it's affecting Activision, Blindlight, Disney Character Studios, EA Productions, Formosa, Insomniac Games, Take-Two Productions, which is over, GTA. Take-Two is the one
Wow.
who owns, Rockstar, and VoiceWorks Productions and Warner Brother Games. That's a brunt of
That's
your heavy hitters in
huge.
the gaming industry. The only one that's
That
missing is
is.
Sledgehammer.
Whoa.
Yeah, and this is, like, actually becoming a big thing, so I'm siding with the actors on this one. I'm a union guy, but
Yep.
yeah, this AI thing, people really need to rope it in a little bit because we're imagine if AI took over, there's 160,000 people out of work.
It is. Well, and there was strikes for the longest time too that were just not resolved until I don't know if it was SAG, it was the writers union, but SAG obviously if you work while the writers union is on strike, that's considered crossing the line. That's you're crossing the picket
Yes.
line.
Yeah.
Your scab. But it's a little bit different. It's interesting that you said because people are striking like some of the people who cater our flights. We're talking about going on strike. Some of the hotel workers we're talking about going on strike, and so we get regular emails from our union saying, "Hey, this is how you go about it," because we don't want to be visually seen. Well, we don't want to cross the line if it's not proper for us to do so. If that makes sense, because you're union. I'm a huge union. Well, you're not union technically. I don't want to get you in trouble
I'm not union anymore. I was back in the
previously.
day.
Yeah, I don't want to get you in trouble at work. But I'm a 100% pro union. I am part of a union, one of the biggest airline unions in the world. Actually, I think it is the
I
biggest one.
think
I'm part
yeah,
of
I
Health.
think you guys topped out.
Yeah, we're the largest representation of pilot groups around the world. So, the last thing we want to do is cross a line where they're striking or picketing.
Mhm.
So we always get information when the different groups do that. So same thing with SAG and stuff. But I'm surprised because I know there has to be something because there's people out there that only do voice acting. So
Yeah.
there has to be something about recreating, especially with game characters in their contract. Someone says you can't do this. Has the union responded at all? Because for
Well,
the voice actors.
the coming towards the end, the article and one of my last bullet points about it is in September. So
Hmm.
let's call it midway through September. The voice game, the video game voice actors and motion capture performance overwhelmingly voted to authorize a strike
Oh,
if the studios walk away from the tables on the new labor contract, which the studios have done twice already. So
ooh,
this
that's
has
gonna
been
be
an
interesting.
uphill. They've had a contract, but the seeds for this little brouhaha actually got planted in 2022
Oh,
when,
okay,
AI was in its infancy and it was what untested technology, it was
gotcha.
nowhere
Okay,
near what it was now, and they saw the writing on the wall with this, and we were like, "Whoa." And it's interesting because I thumbed through the entire article again. Um, there is one actor, Roger Clark, who's the voice of Arthur Morgan in Red Dead Redemption 2, and
yeah. Hmm.
he's kinda like the spearhead. He's been the most vocal against AI
I
technology and pushing back. But and
well, because you
that's
think
it,
it
and
puts
that's
them
where
out of a
NBC
job.
News ended the article.
Oh,
Oh,
that's it.
ended his
That's
paragraph about him. Yeah, I just kinda
I said nope. That's all we
yeah.
got. Well, I
You
mean,
know?
and I do agree with them because it's kind of like AI taking over my job. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's kind of the same thing as job security, but also I don't know. But how do you defend that in court? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you be like, hey, that's my voice? Because what about impressionists? You know what I mean?
right. I
That's
mean,
there's certain things that are free use.
there are a whole bunch of different facets to this. You got the voiceover people, you got the actual actors, you got the people that you just said, uh, and there's gotta be included in that union are actually the sound people, I would assume. I don't know much about SAG because, you know, let's face it, I'm never making it to Hollywood.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. It's
you
yeah.
know,
It's just
just
an
there's
interesting
gotta be
concept.
just so many behind the scenes people that we're not talking about because they're not at the forefront in the gaming industry.
Yeah. I don't know how they would go about that legally because like if someone impersonates me, then that's not technically because there's certain things like it, the source. Like say if they heard me on this is a public broadcast. You know what I mean? So is my voice not technically like if they were to take AI, utilize this podcast as a source for AI to generate my voice, right?
Mhm.
Is
What
that
say do we
technically
have?
yeah, because that's the thing. It's a free live public broadcast of our
Right.
show. So the source was good source. The only thing I could think is like if they were to use it maliciously, you could sue them for like defamation and all that sort of stuff. But
And I'm
I
sure
don't
that's
think
gonna get in there because I gotta be honest with you, I thought it was important enough to bring up on the show, but the article itself was not exactly the best article that I've ever read,
well,
and
yeah.
that's why it was all bullet pointed and no quotes from it. Because I was like, NBC News, what are you doing with this?" You know, it
Yeah. Well,
almost
I
seems
mean,
like it wanted to, not mention a lot of the nitty-gritty, if you will.
well, there's also yeah, well, because there's also probably NDAs and stuff and their associated
Mhm.
contract where they can't talk
Exactly.
about stuff publicly. So, yeah, well, I mean, we'll keep an update because that's a huge thing because that'll completely change the industry
Yeah, I'll be
altogether.
looking for updates at work tonight because I gotta tell you, I'll get done what I need to get done, and then, yeah,
Yeah, so we'll figure it out because I just one of those, it's one of those things. It's like I can't imagine that they would allow it, especially the union won't allow it. But the thing is if it's sourced from a copyright free like public information sort of thing, then eh, I don't know if it's not. I don't think a voice is considered a likeness. To be completely honest, I don't know if they
right.
have a way to defend against it. But if not, then they need to figure out a way to put it in the contract to include voice or likenesses of voices for other monetary gains in it as well. So,
Which I'm sure at
uh,
some point they will. I just don't know what that point is.
yeah, they're gonna have to.
Mhm.
All right, with that, we're going to just transition over to some automotive news here. I am going to keep Tommy up because we like talking trucks. We like talking all sorts of stuff here. So this is from Motor Trend. I love Motor Trend. They have so many good articles and ratings and all sorts of stuff. So what we're talking about today is best half ton trucks. So half ton trucks are your standard pickups, your F-150s, your Ram 1500s, that sort of stuff. So not the Super Duty, the F-150s and stuff like that. So the article name is best half ton truck: Ford, Chevy, Nissan, Ram, and Toyota Workhorse from Motor Trend's William Irvin Lewis on this month, September of 2024. I have it pulled up here because there's pictures associated with the truck, so you guys can kind of see what I'm doing. I do apologize all the ads. That's literally the Motor Trend is just covering ads. So, but number six. So there's six of them. We'll start from the bottom, work our way to the top. Number six is my own 2024 Nissan Titan as a Motor Trend score of 6.8. Nissan is bowing out of the market at the end of 2024. I've talked about that in the past. This is the last year that the Titan's going to be manufactured. Rumor has it that they might be coming back in like 26 or 27 with a new generation of Titan. It may not be called the Titan. It may be a new truck, or they're going the EV route to try to compete with the F-150 Lightning, or they might move away from the 5.6 liter V8 engine, the endurance engine, to another like EcoBoost engine or something like that, which many other people have. Speaking of engines, the truck is only offers one engine, which is the Endurance 5.6 liter V8, compared to the multiple engine options of other trucks out there. And it's actually not the most powerful V8 on the market. It's pretty powerful, but it's not the most powerful. Pros, you got a strong V8, slick 9-speed auto, strong driver assistance suite. I will say, amazing. I have 360-degree cameras, front, back, rear camera, all sorts of uh, emergency braking and sensors and all sorts of stuff to make it you feel really comfortable in the truck, especially if it's your first one. Um, Cons, low towing and payload capacities. I don't know why they said that. It's the payload capacities are pretty similar to the other trucks mentioned in this article. Poor driving dynamics. I haven't experienced that. I've driven an F-150 and it feels like you're playing ping pong because it's electronics driving, whereas the truck that the Titan is hydraulic steering, so it stays put in its lane. I don't know. I like the heavier steering. Low quality interior. I think my interior is pretty good. I also have the higher trim level. So I have like leather seats and some of the finer trim in there. But no matter where you go in the interior of the car is gonna have, unless you're getting like a Bentley or something like that, you're gonna have plastic interior. That's just how it is.
Mm.
But some price or some specs on the 2024 Nissan Titan. The price is around 48,000. That's another thing. These prices are lowballed in this. These must be base models because all these prices I'm going to go over way lower than anything I've seen. But price point $48,000 with a 5.6 liter endurance V8, 400 horsepower, 413 pounds of torque with a payload. So that's what you can put in the bed of the truck of 1,607 pounds and a towing capacity of 9,350 pounds. Which honestly, that's a small camper. That's a trailer. That's kayak. So I mean, if you want to carry bigger things like I don't know fifth wheel or you're on the ranch, you would have to get a bigger truck, which Nissan doesn't sell, but you'd have to get like a 250 F250 or something like that. But up next, for number 6 here is going to be the 2024 Toyota Tundra, and I absolutely hate how this looks. Tommy and I 2 episodes ago talked about Motor Trend's top 10 best looking trucks, and I can't remember if this is on it, but God, it's ugly. I've seen them in person. It's too many boxes. They're like boxes with curves jammed together. I don't know. And the grill is huge. They're probably sitting there going, "Ooh, it makes this thing look mean." It doesn't. It's overbearing. It's ridiculous. If you look in the rearview mirror and you see a grill, it's probably a Toyota Tundra right behind you.
Mhm.
So Toyota Tundra Pros, it has an available hybrid powertrain, modern infotainment system with which, by the way, the Nissan Titan comes with standard with a pretty good infotainment center, and then the Tundra also has nicely weighted steering, which I don't know what that's subjective. I don't know what that means. Cons: busy ride. I have no idea what that means. Maybe just loud, horrible turning radius, and struggles with heavy trailers. Okay, so it's like it looks good, but it doesn't perform very well. Basically,
Well, the
some talking.
Tundra evolved to a luxury truck and got away from go back to the older Tundras, and those things were
Mhm.
workhorses.
Yeah, well, and it's like, have you seen the Honda Ridgelines
Yeah,
or the
yeah, not a fan.
Is it Rivian? Yeah, well, that's they didn't make this list. Spoiler alert, because they suck. But those are like urban pickup trucks. They're not meant to do pickup truck things. Those are so hey, I have a pickup truck but I live in the city. Is kind of what it's about. I don't
Right,
like. I just saw
right.
one the other day, just like a
It's a
Cybertruck.
status symbol.
Yep, exactly. And Tommy and I love Cybertrucks. Um,
Yeah,
so some specs: $41,000 for a base Toyota Tundra, 3.4 liter twin turbo V6, 358 to 437 horsepower. I guess depended on if you're using your twin turbos or not. It didn't specify in the article. Torque from 406 to 583 pounds, and a payload of 1,940 pounds and a towing capacity of 12,000 pounds. So definitely more than the Nissan Titan. But it says it struggles while carrying. And that's honestly probably because only has a 3.4 liter twin turbo V6. So turbo, there's a lot of lag in a turbo because it relies on the air to spin up the compressor versus supercharger, which is directly on the shaft or directly connected to the engine. So that's probably where the lag is coming from. Number 4 is going to be the 2024 uh Ram 1500. I've seen a lot of these out there. It gets a Motor
yeah.
Trend score of 8.4. I don't know, man. I feel like the and you'll see I'll kind of briefly touch on it again as I go down the list. Yeah, they're better, but all the points that this person with William Irvin Lewis, the writer, was talking about are things that you have to add on. Like number one, when we get to number one, it talks about all these cool features, but you have to pay so much more money to get it. And I'll go over that versus the
Yeah.
Nissan that comes with it. So Nissan's number six, but you get all the bells and whistles as part of the truck when you get it. So, anyways, so the 2024 Ram 1500 gets a Motor Trend score of 8.4 out of 10, I'm assuming. Pros, it's comfortable, high quality interior, settled towing experience, multiple off road variants. Cons has a diesel rated transmit or diesel dated transmission, excuse me, lower payload and towing, and an underwhelming acceleration under heavy load. So some specs 41,000, so the same as the Toyota Tundra, 3.6 liter V6, a 5.7 liter V8 engine, or a 6.2 liter supercharged V8. So it
Mm.
does the middle option is a slightly bigger engine than what I got. Horsepower is 305 to 702. Torque is 271 to 650 with a payload of 1,936 pounds and a towing capacity of 11,520 pounds. So not bad. I mean,
No, not
realistic.
terrible.
If you're carrying something that's 12,000 pounds, like I said, you're probably getting like an F250 or a Ram 2500. You know what I mean? It's not, you
Yeah.
usually aren't carrying those loads in a half ton pickup truck.
No, not at
So
all.
the next one is the GMC Sierra. I've seen these a lot. I mean, that's one of the ones I looked at, but once again, as the price point goes up, what you get base, like on the lower trims, is not what it's described. A lot of the stuff that it describes in the article and like what it's ranking off of is describing it's describing all the bells and whistles you'd have to buy. Because I looked at the GMC, I basically said these are the features that I want on my truck, and then I went and looked for those features and priced them out per truck. And that's where the kind of the differences come. But anyways, the GMC Sierra has a Motor Trend score of 8.4. Pros, there's many styles and configurations, four potential engine choices, and available hands-free driving tech if that's important to you. Cons, similar, less expensive. It's similar to less expensive Silverado 1500 and a jittery ride, which I understand that. I've ridden a GMC Sierra before, and it definitely feels like you're just it never settles. You're just constantly either rocking or shaking and rattling down the
It
road,
is
which
a
I
very
personally
hard
hate.
ride. I have a friend of mine who has one, older one, but it is a rough ride. You know, it
Is it?
feels like
Yeah.
you need springs all throughout, and I think his only had, like, 32 or 33,000 miles on it at the time,
Oh
and it just
man.
felt like the front springs were already shot.
It was that the two-wheel drive one that we were talking about, that your friend that
Yeah,
bought the
yeah,
two-wheel
all that
drive
money for a
truck,
two-wheel drive truck.
or a two-wheel GMC Sierra? Yeah. So yeah, I can kind of understand that. And then you know what's ironic is like, oh well, it's the same thing as the Chevy Silverado. That's because GMC, General Motors, also includes Chevrolet. That's why they're so similar. So 2024, that's gonna be number two, which I don't know why it's number two, and I'll explain why here in a second. Number two is the 2024 Chevy Silverado or Chevrolet Silverado with a Motor Trend score of 8.5. Pros: impressive powertrain options. ZR2 off-road model. By the way, I have a Pro 4X off-road model that looks just like that. Much better. Available big screen tech, right? Available, which means you have to, it's an addition. It's available big screen tech. Cons, garish styling. I hate the way it looks. I don't know who looked at the headlight and said, yeah, let's just make it a little whoop.
I
Doesn't make
believe
any
we
sense.
bashed this truck on that episode. Well, not bashed it,
We
but we were,
we ripped it apart.
yeah,
It's not a
pretty
good
much.
looking truck. Basic model stuck with old interior and clumsy driving traits. Some specs on it: 42,000 out the door, 2.5 liter turbo i4, a 5.3 liter V8, a 6.2 liter V8, or a 3 liter turbo diesel i6. Horsepower is 305 to 420, torque 383 to 495 pounds, and a payload of 2,260 pounds and a towing capacity of 13,300 pounds. The problem with this, folks, is Chevy Silverados was one of the trucks. I weighed three different trucks. I looked at Ford F-150s. I looked at Chevy Silverados. I kind of looked at GMCs, but I knew they were going to be expensive and not worth the money. And also the Nissan, because my wife had a Nissan prior, and I thought it was a good value car. Chevy if you go to the base model, so this base model of $42,000, right? You get absolutely freaking nothing. You won't get cruise control. You'll get a 3.5 inch, or maybe is it a 7 inch display. If you want the big like infotainment display, like what I got, like I think it's a 13 inch. You have to pay for the next trim or pay for like an equipment package with it. You're talking about like plastic, bare, in just basic. That's what you get for $42,000. And that's why, like, and maybe it's because I'm taking it personally because I have a Nissan Titan, but when they said, "Oh, low quality interior," I'm like, "Have you seen the inside of a Chevy Silverado? Like, that's as plastic and cheap as you can get." You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's not. I don't know what you're comparing it to, because even Fords rattle and crap. Fords have low quality interiors because everybody uses the same plastic trim, the same plastic molding. The only thing that changes is how it looks. Like I have carbon fiber kick panels on my doors. Well, they look like carbon fiber, but they're actually the same plastic trim. The only thing that's different is like my armrest are leather, my seats are leather, etc. But guess what? I got it for a lesser price than if I were supposed to get it with Chevy. Because if I want all that stuff as Chevy, you're going to the ZR2 and higher level in
Hmm.
terms of trucks. So you're going to pay not 42,000, you're paying like $75,000 for what I got for much less. I just don't understand that when they're like low quality interior. No, it's the same interior. I just paid less for it. So
Right.
I've never been a fan of. I can't say been a fan of Chevy. My Chevy Cruze was the car that I had before my truck. That thing got me through so much. I had it for 7 years, absolutely zero maintenance issues while I had it. The maintenance issues that I did have weren't my fault. Like I had a tire that went completely flat, not while I was driving. It was on a kayaking adventure, and I knew that something was screwy. The the company said, "Oh, we'll drive your car down to where you get out from the river." I was like, "I've never heard that before. Normally they just bust you up." Well, whoever drove my car to the pickup spot, or where we got out of the river from kayaking, popped my tire. So,
Hmm.
yeah, but nothing from the actual vehicle itself. It was such a great vehicle, but it was very basic. It came with a very small infotainment center. It had plug and play Apple and Android CarPlay, and it didn't have any cruise control, right? So it's a very basic vehicle for not a whole lot of money. If you want everything that I got on my Pro 4X, my Nissan Titan Pro 4X, then you're going to have to spend probably about $15,000 more than what I spent on my truck. So, which is once again super surprising, because that brings us to the number one, which, as you probably guessed it, is the freaking Ford Colt. Man, they're as bad as like the Jeep Colt.
Yeah.
Um, so the number one is the Ford F-150. It's a Motor Trend Sport score of 8.6. Not my personal favorite. Pros: gas, hybrid, and EV options. So there's multiple engine options, and I will give Ford, it's a pro and a con. Ford has so many trim levels. They have like 8 different trim levels, which is good because that means you can customize it more within your range. Because like the STX is like technically between the base and the next one, so you get a little more options without going full on to whatever the next level is. And then I think the highest one is like the King Ranch or whatever it is, whatever the high
Hmm.
end trim is. But here's the problem: it's also a business tactic because it allows them to nickel and dime you for everything, right? So rather than saying, well, instead of paying for, but you go to each level and they charge you as you go. So, um, let's see. So there's gas, hybrid, EV options, thoughtful, high tech interior. That's if you buy it. Base model does not have it. And then the Raptor R, which is an atrocious vehicle. Cons: it's minor cosmetic updates. Hybrids touchy brake pedal, and Raptors are a fuel economy. So let me just point, and I've talked about this before with Tommy. My Nissan Titan Pro 4X, right, is an off road version, right? It's like the ZR2. It has a skid plate, it has the hooks, big old targe, and it's meant to off road. It's the equivalent of a Raptor, in my opinion, because it's meant to do the same thing. It's in the same market. It's the Pro 4X is in the same kind of category as the Raptor. The Raptor is $90,000. Okay, my car, not what I got because I got a better deal, but MSRP for my car with all my equipment, it has all the same equipment as a Raptor, right? All the same. My truck was MSRP'd at 65. Mine was less. I got it for less than that, but MSRP'd at 65,000 with all the bells and whistles. So once again, if you want that tech, and you want it in a truck that is of similar quality, because mind you, the only thing that's really different is you open the door and there's a little American flag on the side there to let you know that the Ford was made in America. It's basically the same truck. Um, Also, my truck technically has a better engine because it's a naturally aspirated V8. It's not an EcoBoost. There's no turbos involved with it. And if you're looking at a Raptor, the Nissan Titan actually has a better payload, or actually has better towing capacity than the Raptor. The Raptor, I think, is only like 7,000 pounds, unless you go up to the Raptor R, which is like 95,000, maybe $100,000 to get the 700 horsepower to be able to tow more. So it's like, okay, at that point, you're buying it because it's a Ford, not because it's a better truck. Um,
Right.
so I don't necessarily, like I said, I am heavily biased. But anyways, the F-150 is 38,000. That is the base work model. Okay, that's like you barely get a steering wheel with that thing. 2.7 liter twin turbo V6, all the way up to, there were so many options, I don't want to list all of them. 5.2 liter supercharged V8. Horsepower varies between 325 horsepower and 700 horsepower. Torque 400 to 640. Payload of 2,445 pounds and a towing capacity of 13,500 pounds, and that's with the higher engine. Um, so yeah, I don't understand the Ford mentality. I mean, I did look at Ford. That was the first type of truck I wanted, but then more and more I realized, well, like my big things were like I wanted be able to remote start my vehicle, right? Just come home from
Mhm.
the airport, middle of the winter or summer, turn it on, and it's cooled off or heated up by the time I get out there. That's super simple. Well, to be able to do that, that's not available on the base or STX levels of the F-150. You have to go up to the third trim level to be able to get that. And guess what? That's an additional like $15,000 normally in sales price, at least that I
Right.
saw.
Of course.
Um, what else? Like heated or ventilated seats. You're not seeing that on that third trim level. You have to go up. I think to the Lariat is where you see that. Push to start, right? Where I don't, keyless entry and push to start. Where I don't want to use the key. I just want to push to start my vehicle, which comes standard in every Nissan vehicle. You have to go up to the third. I think it's the Lariat level to be able to get that on this truck. So it's just one of those things I don't understand. And also, you know what Ford stands for, right, Tommy?
Fix or repair daily.
Absolutely, or found on road dead.
Yep.
So it's one they don't have a, and everybody you talk to about old F-150s, was it called the steering wheel death wobble? That's when your
Mhm.
steering rack has to be replaced. You don't hear those things about Titan, but the difference is that Ford owners will let you know that they're Ford owners. Titan owners, we don't really. We quietly drive our trucks.
Mm.
We know we have the best truck. We just don't have to tell everybody that we have the best truck. Um, so I personally don't. I guess it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for like the brand name thing, then I guess go get a Ford. But if you're looking for like best bang for your buck, I still think the Nissan is it. I mean, Tommy drives a Nissan. Is your sedan the same way?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
my sedan's got everything I need in it. You
yeah,
know
and it's probably a good fraction of the cost of versus other cars that have
Oh, yeah.
similar, right?
Plus, my even though I got the CV transmission in mine, it,
Yeah.
it's warranted up to 120,000 miles, factory warranty, because back
Oh, nice.
when the CVs had all their problems. But,
Yeah.
straight up, I love the keyless entry, the push to start, um, and my car actually has the, sport mode transition if I want. So I just flip a switch on the bottom of the selector and I go from economy to sport mode, so it gives me a little bit more. Yeah, yeah, those 4 little pistons just make a lot more noise. I've never used it, believe it or not. I never used the sport setting on the transmission, but
Yeah, neither have I. I've honestly never.
I I'm actually in the process of talking to my local Nissan dealer about a 2024 Sentra.
There you go. And that's what I'm saying. It's like I don't know. I just if you want the brand name, I guess go get it. Like if someone says, "Ooh, I drive a Ford," I sit there go, "Okay." And you know what
Yeah,
I mean? It's one of those things. It's like just because you drive a Ford doesn't make you the best thing on the road. So I don't know. I like my Nissan Titan, especially everybody that I talked to, especially when I announced that I was getting the Nissan Titan. Family and some friends that were like, "Oh yeah, I had a Titan back in the day. It's a great truck. I wish I still had it and stuff." It's a lot of good reviews on the Titan. So I guess it just kind of comes down to what you're looking for. If you want to pay a ridiculous amount of money to say you paid a ridiculous amount of money to get certain features, then go for it. But if you want those features standard as part of the package that's delivered, then just get the one that makes the most sense, like the Nissan. So,
Right.
and I'm honestly sold. I haven't had my truck for more than a year. I almost have 2,000 miles on it now because I love driving the thing. I take it everywhere. We'll be driving it to Florida in our cruise in March because my wife convinced me. Even though the gas mileage is not as good as my wife's car, my wife's car gets like 35 miles to the gallon, and my truck gets like 20 on the highway. But the thing is comfort. It's a 22-hour drive that we're doing, and it's way more comfortable, especially for me because I'm a big guy. So being in a bigger car makes it a little bit easier for me um, to travel that long. And also, I need to fit into Florida, so my big old truck, my big old tires will definitely fit
Yep,
going
that'll
down to
fit in
Florida.
Florida, especially if you're
It'll
going
be
to South
perfect.
Florida.
Yeah, exactly. So I gotta make sure that we bring the A game with our car. But yeah, that's what Motor Trend said. And actually, like I said, I'm surprised that Motor Trend ranked them that way. But I mean, that's the writer's preference. I guess it's subjective. So I'm saying I think my Titan's number one. I think Nissan's a great company, even though other people say it's not. But all right, with that, Tommy D, let's move on to a jargon in a jiffy. So jargon in a jiffy is a game that Tommy D and I play where we take industry terms from each other's careers, and then we present it to one another and have the other person guess what the word or the phrase means to try to help us learn about our industry and the terms that we use. So I think you went first last week,
I
right?
did. I did.
Okay, so you want me to go first this week?
I do.
I think I got a stumper. I think I
Okay.
got a stumper. All right. So the phrase, it's not a word, it's a phrase called high minimums captain. Okay. High minimums captain. And here's a sentence: I had to alert dispatch that I could not legally depart to our destination because the weather had gone below my high captain minimums or high minimums captain. So it's the high minimums.
So, captain only takeoff, and at the upper threshold of what your takeoff minimums would be?
Not okay. So high minimums captain. So it applies to it's a high. How do I'm trying not to give it away. So it pertains to a specific type of captain. Or not necessarily type, but it's not every captain has high captain minimums.
Hey, you got me on this one because I've
Okay.
never even heard the expression.
Yeah, so it's because there's a lot of exemption nows with the technology that we have, but high captain minimums is when you're a new captain and you have less than 100 hours on the aircraft that you're flying, you are considered a high minimums captain. What that means is that your minimums for approaches go up. So let's say a standard Cat 1 ILS, like we talked about last week,
Mhm.
right, is 200 and a half statute mile. Well, you have to raise that up by 100 feet and a half statute mile. So now your minimums as a high minimums captain is 301. So even though your approach plate says that you can go down to 200 and a half, you as a high minimums captain can't go to an airport or can't shoot an approach below 301 because you're new to the airplane.
That kinda makes sense. Safety-wise,
Yeah,
that
it's
makes sense.
exactly. And it's the same thing. Oh, okay. I'm gonna hit pause because that's good for
Next
next
week.
week's. Yeah, I don't want to go too into it, but there's other things in um that do that. They're kind of like a safety measure. But that's what a high captain minimum or high minimum captain is. We do have a lot of exceptions. Like if, for example, if it has an autopilot, or we can use the autopilot and flight director down to Cat 1 mins. As long as we leave the autopilot on, we can descend all the way to the Cat 1 minimums and shoot a normal Cat 1 approach. As long as the winds aren't like higher than 15 knots, there's certain parameters that you have to meet in our manual to be able to exempt yourself from the 301. So
Gotcha.
and it varies per airline, but the FAA high captain minimums is raising that by the minimums by 100 feet and a half statute mile.
I'm with you. Good one. That
There you
was a
go.
real good one.
Yeah, yeah, and I just had an idea for next week's, so I got to write it down. But what do you got for me today, Tommy?
So, mine is the monitor. The monitor, and it comes from, the EMS side of my career.
Okay.
Uh, I'm still not sure what I could talk about and where I work now with all the new stuff we got.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so here's the sentence. I was on the scene and I watched the fire department take down a wall with their monitor nozzle. Yeah,
Can you
and I've
what?
actually seen this in real life. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Monitor nozzle?
Mhm,
I don't know what that is. Monitor take down a wall
mhm, with the
with
monitor
their
nozzle.
monitor nozzle. Is it a nozzle that causes like a high pressure,
Oh,
like a
yeah,
high
it's high
pressure
pressure.
discharge? Is
Yeah.
it th but what makes it a are you asking me, like, what makes it a monitor nozzle? Is there something special
No,
about the
no, no,
shape
no, I
or
no, I don't expect you to know that one.
Yeah, I have no idea. Is it I'm just assuming it's a nozzle that you attach to make
It
it super high
is,
pressure.
and very, very few engine companies actually carry it because it's so high pressure, and you know what a torpedo heater looks like, the kerosene torpedo heaters?
Yeah, mhm, yep, I've
Okay,
seen
so it
those.
looks like that, only a little bit wider in diameter,
Okay.
and do you remember back in the day when Batman and, it was cartoon and you'd see them shoot that laser beam that was a very tight, strong circle?
Yeah, mhm.
That's what a monitor is, and they literally
Oh,
place it on the ground and they chalk it down and 2 guys stand on either side, and it will with that high pressure that I could put it will blow down a brick wall without a problem. You know,
interesting.
yeah, they used it, um, I'd seen it in Brooklyn twice on an old house, and they just totally destroyed the wall.
Well, look out, we're coming through.
Yeah, it's
Hey,
amazing,
it's
like,
Santa Claus.
the actual power of high pressure water.
Oh, that's unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, water, it's a force to be reckoned with. I didn't know that's what it was called, though, but so I learned something new. A
Yeah,
monitor
yeah,
nozzle?
monitor. Mhm.
Monitor. Was it a
Even though
monitor
it's
or
kind
monitor
of
nozzle?
misleading because it's really not a nozzle. When you talk about nozzle, you think they're connecting it to the end of the hose. No, this
Yeah.
bad boy, they just drag off the truck, plug it into the side, and, hope for the
Oh, it's not
best.
even a nozzle, it's not something you can pull, it's just
No,
it's a
it
type
doesn't
of
even go
hose.
on the end of an tack line, like an inch and a half or
It's
2-inch
just
line.
it's
Yeah, it's a
it's just a
4-inch supply line that comes off the side panel of the truck. It's a
interesting.
bigger line, like, they'll empty an 800-gallon tanker out, you know,
That's
quick.
impressive. Yeah, no, I didn't think Interesting. Okay. Well, I learned something new, and that's the point of Jargon in a Jiffy. Now, I do have a special treat for us for safety stand down today because I know everybody loves listening to me drag on and drone on about aviation accidents. So, safety stand down is where we talk about significant accidents that have happened since the beginning of aviation to now to kind of show everybody how the industry has become so safe and why we operate the way we do. Because there may be times where you're like, why do airline pilots do this? A lot of these accidents have led up to that. Today, we're talking about TWA or Trans World Airlines Flight 514 in Mountain Weather, Virginia, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. This happened back in 1974. But instead of me explaining it today, this one has, I always use the FAA website. Um, to talk about this stuff, and because it's a good website, it's a database of accidents and basically tells you everything that you need to know about the accident, what came of it. But this one actually had a video, so I'm gonna minimize Tommy and I'm gonna let the video play, and let me make sure all the audio's up, and I'm gonna let the video play so we can listen to it. So we're gonna let it talk about the TWA 514, and then once it's done, we'll come back and we'll talk about what happened after the accident, so on and so forth. So let's get this.
As a result of an airport closure at Washington National Airport, TWA Flight 514 was diverted to Dulles International Airport in suburban Virginia. While in contact with Washington Air Route Traffic Control Center, initial radio discussion provided maneuvering instructions to place Flight 5.
Hold on a second. I don't think it's actually playing. Hold on. I'm getting nothing. Hold on. I think I know why too. Because I was messing with things yesterday, Tommy D. Oh my god.
Of course you
I
are.
was messing with stuff to try to split off audio. So give me just a second. Sound mixer. I overcomplicate stuff to stream. So all right, Chrome. I'm gonna have this because I can hear it, but that's because it's only getting routed to my earphones here. Um, let us do. I'll do that. Okay, let me try this. Could you hear it talking, Tommy?
I heard him talking with no problem. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So this should.
As a result of an airport closure at Washington National Airport, TWA Flight 514 was diverted to Dulles International Airport in suburban Virginia. While in contact with Washington Air Route Traffic Control Center, initial radio discussion provided maneuvering instructions to place Flight 514 on the final approach heading and at an altitude from which to begin the approach to Dulles. These instructions put the airplane on a heading to intercept the 300-degree radial of the Armel VOR and included an instruction to cross a point 25 miles northwest of the Armel VOR at 8,000 feet. The Armel VOR is located 6 nautical miles from Dulles Airport. Over the next few minutes, the crew discussed the VOR DME approach to Dulles, including items on the approach chart, and specifically discussed one intersection, Round Hill, which was depicted on the approach chart as the initial approach fix and was approximately 18 nautical miles from the airport. At 11:01 a.m., as the flight was descending from 11,000 feet to 8,000 feet, the controller issued instructions to continue the descent to 7,000 feet and to contact Dulles Approach Control. 26 seconds later, the crew contacted Dulles Approach Control and advised that the flight was passing through 10,000 feet for 7,000 feet. The controller replied with a clearance to proceed inbound to Armel and to expect a VOR DME approach to runway 12. At 11:04, the flight reported that they were level at 7,000 feet. 5 seconds later, the controller cleared the flight for the VOR DME approach to runway 12. The first officer who was flying the airplane then initiated a descent, followed by a comment from the captain that 1,800 feet was the minimum descent altitude. At 11:07, as the airplane was passing through approximately 3,000 feet and 5.5 miles from impact, the captain commented that the approach chart specified a minimum altitude of 3,400 feet until reaching Round Hill, the final approach fix. A discussion ensued, concluding that since the flight had been cleared for the approach, the minimum altitude did not apply, and 1,800 feet was the altitude to which the flight should descend. In fact, 3,400 feet was the correct minimum altitude for the approach until reaching the Round Hill intersection, 18 miles from the airport. Beginning at 11:08, the crew discussed the limited visibility, and that the ground visual contact was only intermittent. During this discussion, the sound of an altitude alert horn was recorded on the cockpit voice recorder. About 40 seconds later, the altitude alert horn sounded again, accompanied by crew discussion about winds and turbulence levels. Another altitude alert sounded at 11:09 and stopped 2 seconds later with a recording of impact sounds. Flight 514 had impacted Mount Weather at an altitude of approximately 1,700 feet just below the summit of the mountain and while still 25 nautical miles from the airport. The NTSB determined that the descent to 1,800 feet had occurred prior to the aircraft reaching a point in the approach where a minimum altitude of 1,800 feet was applicable, and placed primary responsibility for the accident on the pilots for having descended to an unsafe altitude.
There we go. So I'll close that down. See, that's a lot easier than me sitting here explaining it. Don't you think?
It is I kind of like the visual.
Yeah. Well, and the thing it's awesome, but the problem is not every accident has that. I was just doing my research yesterday and to writing all my notes down for the podcast, and I saw the video. I was like, oh, this will be perfect. This is exactly what we need. So that way you don't have to listen to me. It's a visual. Now, what we're going to talk about what I'm going to talk about is what came as a result of it, because that's something that the video didn't describe. So after the incident, this is what resulted of it. There was a fleet-wide requirement for the installation of ground proximity warning system, or GPWIS, as you guys know it. Later on to become enhanced GPWIS once it has different modes. But it started off with ground proximity warning system. It was required to be installed in all carrier aircraft by December of 1975. There was revisions of 14 CFR Part 91 with regard to pilot responsibilities and actions after receiving a clearance for a non-precision approach. Creation of the aviation safety reporting system managed by NASA. So I talked about SAPs, or the ASAP program, but for general aviation, there's the NASA program, which basically is, as long as you're not doing something intentionally negligent, reckless, or you weren't under the influence of drugs or alcohol, if something were to happen, you're able to submit a report to NASA as a, hey, I messed up. It gets de-identified and the data gets shared amongst the agencies to help improve the safety in aviation. So it's a non-punitive way of reporting oopsies, so that way we help improve the system. And like I said, the best part is it's non-punitive, and if there's ever any sort of FA action that comes out of it, like going after your license, you can say, hey, I did the right thing, I reported it, here's my de-identified strip of paper. It's the get out of jail basically free card. So that's was created as a result of this accident. With regard to terrain clearance, subsequent CFIT, which is controlled flight into terrain type accidents, have led to an evolution of JIPWIS capabilities, resulting in an enhanced JIPWIS TAWS system, like I just said. Insurance of rulemaking by the FAA in 2002 that made the installation of TAWS, or JIPWIS, or eJIPWIS, mandatory throughout the air carrier fleet, and modification of air traffic control procedures such as that altitude restrictions are issued during non-precision instrument approaches. So basically, they cleared them for the approach because back then in the non-radar environment in 1974, it was assumed that it was the pilot's responsibility to know where the aircraft was, not air traffic control's responsibility. Air traffic control was just responsible for sequencing to get to the airport. And that's because there was still a lot of non-radar environments that existed during that time. But this accident changed it to where the air traffic control was having a little more responsibility with the positioning of aircraft. So normally, like back then, they just cleared them for the approach, and it was up to the pilots to descend and get to the runway. Now, when you get an approach clearance, there's always an altitude associated with it. Associated with it. It's like breeze 123, turn left heading 050, maintain 3,000 feet until established on the localizer, cleared localizer approach runway 12 Dulles. Right. So there's always an altitude associated with it, and that's their minimum vectoring altitude that keeps you safe above the terrain. Installation of modification in the ARTS 3 system. That's what the computer program that runs the air traffic control system, which includes altitude reporting system, so that controllers will receive alerts when aircraft flights deviates from predetermined altitudes when operating inside a terminal area. Air traffic controllers have this thing called minimum vectoring altitudes. We can't see them. We don't know them as pilots, but it's the minimum altitude that they can descend you to vector you around and still be safe of all terrain and stuff around you. If you go below the minimum vectoring altitude in a certain area, they'll get an alarm, and then you'll get a low altitude alert. Check your altimeter 2992. Maintain this altitude. That's what Southwest got when they were going to Oklahoma a couple months ago, and they went too low and flew over that high school or whatever. I talked about it on Bill's Corner. They got an altitude alert from Oklahoma Air Traffic Control in Oklahoma City, and that's what that system does. That system says, "Hey, they're below minimum vectoring altitude. Alert, alert." So all this safety stuff came from this one accident, TWA 514 in Mount Weather. What do you think, Tommy D?
I think that was hopefully they learned a lot from that one too, because as the recording was going on, the narrator had said the captain had made this remark, the captain made that remark. So maybe a little bit of progression with crew resource management.
So here's the thing. We're getting to that because I'm sure you're familiar with Tenerife.
Yes, very.
So Tenerife, the huge thing is the power distance gap between the captain and the first officer on the KLM flight. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It was because of that accident, and later on in 1989, United Airlines started developing CRM. And it was actually United Airlines that spearheaded that program. So we'll talk about that. We're getting to that accident. It's coming up. It's in the 1980s. We're in 1974 right now, so we're going chronologically. We'll get to that. But right at this point, CRM didn't exist. The captain's authority was absolute at that time. The FO, we just got coffee and said, "Good landing, sir." That's all we
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
You
back
you know,
then, and spoke about
that's all.
stock options.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, so what are you doing on your layover? Like
Yeah,
that's all we did. Um, Definitely a different change, but that's the whole point of safety send down is we're learning about the progression because you'll see because right now you're just like, man, how does that not happen nowadays? Well, that's why. So it's kind of like a building block method. As we get more and more and more through the timeline, you'll see how we've built up to the safe industry that we have today here in the United States and other countries as well. All right, let's see. Let's do some viewer Q&A. I only saw Ashley in our live stream, and Franco just popped in on YouTube. Hey, Franco. But I don't have any questions on my side, especially because we're not live on TikTok. So
yeah, no,
you don't got
I have
anything over there?
nothing. Hello, Ash. Hello, Franco, and then very early in the show, Frank Viper. Hello, best viewers on. I don't know who that is. That's a new name for me. Maybe from
Okay.
your side.
Maybe I don't know. Well, welcome y'all because, like I said, this is the first time we're not doing a TikTok one because TikTok is just a pain to run, and a resource hog. So Tom and I just sort of like, well, we're just gonna run it on YouTube and Twitch today. So now we get to move on to our discussion topic, which this week actually Tommy came up with this one. He sent it to me in a text, and I said, "This we got to do this one." So the name of the episode is "Spacecraft" by Temu, and we're talking about whether or not third-party manufacturers should be allowed to develop spacecraft for human flight. And this is on the, I guess, not coattails, but on the backside of the Boeing capsule, right? That's what
Hmm.
inspired it, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah. Because
About
I was actually
there's still,
watching that come back to orbit. Come back
yeah,
to Earth.
in the Utah desert. And they're still up there. The poor astronauts are stuck there until 2025 because I'm assuming they're gonna fix it and then send the capsule back up to get them.
Yeah, because option
Is that what
B
it is?
wasn't really feasible. They were gonna send one of the SpaceX ones up to go grab them with suits that are because the suits in the Boeing and the suits at SpaceX are
Are
not
different.
compatible.
Okay.
So they were going to use the measurements of the crew to manufacture the SpaceX suits for them and then blast them up into a capsule, dock, and bring them home. And then someone finally said, whoa, 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 that might not necessarily work. Because just
Oh,
because someone's got a 34-inch chest in Boeing doesn't mean there's a 34-inch
oh,
chest
I
in
gotcha.
space. There was just
It's too
way
much.
too many crew safety question marks with that plan. And
Gotcha.
so I'm glad they actually um
Well,
voiced up and stopped that.
as an astronaut, I'd be like, wait, you want me to go back in the capsule that just broke? That'd be my thing. Is like, I don't. If you
Mhm.
want, I want to go back. Can you guys send like a NASA one up or something? So that is, I mean, it is your topic, Tommy. So what do you think? Do you think third party manufacturers like Boeing and SpaceX and like Blue Origin, yeah, Blue Origin. What's the other
Origin.
one?
Um, no, I can't remember.
You, I can't remember. I should know this because I saw it at the thing because Orion capsule is NASA, so NASA's still kind of in the mix too.
Mhm.
But what do you think? Do you think
I
third
think NASA
party?
should have the absolute say so over it. I don't think there should be actual physical spacecraft coming from third party. Not that Boeing or SpaceX or Blue Orion, it's not that they can't develop a safe aircraft, but
Mhm.
if you look back, the third party services have always been with NASA. I mean, let's face it, like a lot of the older space capsules, like Grumman had a huge hand with NASA while we
Yeah,
were discovering flight and going through. I think we should go back to that type of system because I just think even though
is it not the same
technology
system?
it
Isn't
is
it
to
the
a
same?
degree, but now they're open for bid.
Oh,
So
oh, okay.
Boeing's gonna bid with the what is it, the Star bidder or something like that, whatever they call the capsule.
Starliner.
And yeah, Starliner. And
Yeah,
now it's gonna be, well, SpaceX outbid us this time. We're gonna undercut the bid and do this. My problem is, and the reason why I say Nash should have on it, when you have a bidding war, it's always gonna
be
maybe
the
not
budget
necessarily
cuts
100% of the time, but the lowest bidder is gonna win a good brunt of the time. What
right
corners are they cutting to be the lowest bidder?
to be able to make
'Cause they
that.
gotta
Yeah,
save money somewhere.
that's true. So back when Grumman and back in the Apollo program, my wife and I love space documentaries and stuff. We actually watched Apollo. What did we watch the other? Oh, the one with Ryan Gosling where he played Armstrong.
Mhm.
Um, and we just watched that, and we also watched Apollo 13. My wife has seen the movie, but hasn't seen the documentary. Fun fact: I've met Gene Kranz in person, the flight director from Apollo 13. I was interning for NASA in high school in Johnson Space Center. We got to sit in the actual mission control, not the viewing area that most visitors do, but they let us actually sit in mission control. And my position in the internship group, I was the flight director per se. So I got to sit in the flight director seat, and then Gene Kranz came in and talked to us about Apollo 13 and all that sort of stuff. And fun fact, he never said failure's not an option. That's not a thing. He's like, that's something that Hollywood made up. He's like, all that stuff in the gift shop, I never said. So I
No,
have a
I can
picture
imagine
with
some of the
him.
words he did say.
Yeah, and I have a picture with him. I have it hanging. Well, it's not here. Still haven't unpacked it, but I had it hanging in my old office of me next to him. So I agree, because back then it was a little bit different. So like when Apollo series and stuff, you were third partying, but it was government funding. They were giving him money to do it, right? Based off a
Mhm.
budget. There wasn't a bidding war. It wasn't like, all right, what can you guys do it
No.
for?
No, you're gonna
So
work on the heat shield. You're gonna do this. Here's your budget.
so I agree. I 100% agree with you. I think that is a complete like difference between then and now. Because when you said that, I was like, well, that's what they did back during Apollo. Like, what changed? You're right. There was a bidding war now. And honestly, if you want to root cause it, is because of the not defunding, but the decrease in funding to space exploration during the shuttle days. And the reason why it winded down in 2012 and stuff like that is because of how much it costs. The space shuttle was a huge cost, but it was less cost than the Apollo rocket, because everything in the Apollo rocket, other than the capsule, wasn't technically reusable. And I don't even think the capsule on Apollo was reusable, right?
No. No, they
No,
weren't.
it wasn't.
They went to go get studied. Like, during the debrief, they got ripped down, and they had the metallurgists and all the
Okay.
systems,
Well, because I would say I
looked
don't
at
think.
and studied.
Okay,
But,
because I would say I don't think it was, but the space shuttle was reusable, so it was less of a cost than Apollo, because they actually were able to use a majority or reuse a majority of the
mhm,
orbiter and the
and
boosters.
I actually got to meet a shuttle astronaut and hang out with him.
I had
Uh,
dinner with yeah with
yeah, if you
Ross.
Google, Neil Richards,
Okay.
he's from right here. He's from Dunmore, you know, 10 minutes away from my house. So when we were moving back up to Pennsylvania, I was looking for a house. Just by chance, I made the phone call and I went and saw the house. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, why do you look really familiar? He's like, oh, my name's Neil, this, that, and the other thing. And there's a big sign when you come into Dunmore, home of
Yeah.
NASA astronaut Neil Richards. So he actually was, I forget which STS he was on, but he got to do a couple EVAs and stuff like that. So when
Yeah.
I went back to
It's
look at the house for a second time, we
yeah.
totally didn't talk about the house. We talked about his days at
Space.
Annapolis, the days at the space shuttle, and the training. Like, the training in and of itself to be a shuttle astronaut was a lifetime.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
He
because you had to
he
get
was in his
selected into the astronaut
40s
corps.
before he
Yeah.
flew.
Yeah. I mean, and I was spoiled because Florida Tech, there's astronauts left and right. The dean of the Aerospace Engineering College is astronaut Scott. Um,
Okay.
he was there all the time. I got invited by one of my former bosses that I worked for while I was at Florida Tech to the Astronaut Hall of Fame. It's a scholarship, but the Astronaut Hall of Fame dinner. So I'll never forget. That's the first time I saw the Atlantis exhibit out in um, Kennedy Space Center, and it brought me
Mhm.
to tears. It was amazing how they present it. But we had a cocktail party, which I had soda because I was too young to drink, but um, had a cocktail party with the astronauts underneath the Atlantis to start off with, and then dinner was underneath the Saturn V rocket, which was awesome. So you walk in and all the tables are spread out underneath the Saturn V. I got to meet the last surviving Gemini. Um,
Okay.
his name is escaping me right now, but Jimmy a pilot or a astronaut. I had dinner, so each table had an astronaut. So I had Ross was his last name. I can't remember his first one, but he was a mission specialist on Discovery, I think. And then I also met Pete or Curtis Brown.
Mhm.
I think it's Curtis Brown. He flies for, I think he still flies for Sun Country now, but I met him because we were both pilots. So my boss introduced me to him. Uh, So I mean, it's just this entire like 500 people and just tons of astronauts. So I got spoiled when I was at Florida Tech in
That's
terms of
actually really
space.
cool. They see funny you should bring up Shuttle Discovery. My confirmation gift now, this goes back a little bit. I was in 7th grade when I made my
Hmm.
confirmation. Um, my godmother and her husband, my confirmation gift was a trip to Florida for a week,
Hmm.
and they didn't tell me what they booked, but we did the bus tour around Kennedy Space Center,
Oh, that's
and,
epic.
yeah, it was the maiden flight of Shuttle Discovery. She was on 39A,
Oh,
just waiting
nice.
for the day to
Very
launch.
nice. Yeah,
When I
I've seen it on the pad. Unfortunately, I've never been at the Cape for a space shuttle launch, but I saw off the back of a cruise ship when I was younger, going to the Bahamas, coming out of Canaveral. We watched Space Shuttle Discovery because that's we were downrange, so it flew like out right over us.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, because we would watch it when I lived in Florida because I was living in Florida for the return to flight. So when the shuttle it was grounded for a couple years because of one was it Challenge Columbia?
it's probably Challenger. Well, Columbia was in 2003.
That
When were
was
you in
it.
Florida?
When they returned to flight a few years later.
Yeah, so in the early 2000s.
Yeah, um, so the state of Florida shut down on launch day. When
Hmm.
NASA gave it like a 90% that they're gonna be that this is gonna happen, the state pretty much shut down. And I lived about 110 miles from the Space Coast. And
Hmm.
those of you who've been to Florida, Space Coast, you know exactly what it is.
Yeah, I
So
lived
we
on the
would
Space
watch
Coast.
the
Yeah.
launch. Once the shuttle cleared the tower, we'd walk out front and face southeast. And there she would be. You'd see her cresting. You wouldn't see the shuttle. You would see the big white,
Yeah, I
like
mean,
you knew it was
unless
the
yeah,
shuttle, but you saw more of the thrust
yeah,
and the
the
burners
flames.
going.
Yeah.
And one of the most beautiful ones I ever saw was at night because you just saw those three main engines for what seemed like a half hour because that's how
Yep.
clear of a night it was.
Downrange.
It was great.
Yeah. Yeah, and,
But
I
I
was
still
gonna
think NASA should maintain that control. They should outsource the budget, not the work.
yeah, well, but here's the problem, though. If the government cuts for whatever reason, whether it be political or they just well, like, next year, they're letting or in 2 years, they're letting the space station, what we've been building for 40 plus years, it's gonna burn up in the atmosphere. They're gonna let it burn up in the atmosphere. It's too costly to maintain.
Yeah.
Um but the budget cuts at NASA is what's forcing it because NASA doesn't have the
Mhm.
budget it did, because back in the 1960s, Apollo and stuff, Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson, they both were like, we got to beat the Russians. So you guys have unlimited budget. We got to get to the moon before the Russians.
Yeah, he pretty
It's not
much
the same
dared
now.
NASA be up there by the end of the decade. Let's see what
Yeah,
you can do.
exactly. So the problem now though is we don't have the money. It's not that we
Right.
don't have it, but the government's not allocating it to NASA and space exploration. Which, granted, there are some problems we need to solve on Earth first that we need to get through. But that's probably the reason why they went to the third party bidding process because now it's not a matter of we have unlimited budget that we can just throw at these issues. It's we got to find a way to manufacture these in our little budget for like capsules.
Mhm.
And that's where the bidding comes in, where Boeing's like, "Oh, I can do it for this cost," and then Lockheed Martin comes and says, "Oh, I can do it for this cost," and that's where we're
Yep.
losing kind of a little bit to it. And obviously, Boeing already has a spotty record, so this doesn't help at all with what's going on there. I think Boeing just needs to take
Take
a
a
second.
knee. They
Yeah,
they need
just
to
take a
take a
second.
knee for a week or so. Yeah,
Yeah, well, did you see that they're developing the 797? And they've actually announced that they're going to be doing it in Washington. So I'm like
I
sitting there
heard.
going, "Great. Great. Another
I
airplane to
heard.
get grounded for 3 weeks off the go." Um but yeah, so I don't I don't mind the fact that they're being manufactured by a third party, but like you said, I think there needs to be strong quality assurance, which in NASA still has oversight on everything. Their engineers probably check everything, or they should. Um, but it's just one of those things that's like we've like you said, we turned into a lowest bidder system
We
versus
have. We have.
the best to do it. So I'm glad that the astronauts are safe, but it absolutely sucks that now they're going to have an unscheduled stay in space for what is it? It's nine, so another at least 3 4 months before they're back home. That's
Mhm.
missing Thanksgivings, that's missing Halloween, that's missing Christmas.
Right,
It's
and
obviously a contingency they talk about, but it sucks to be, be stuck
I'm
up
also
there.
concerned about their health.
What do
It's
you
a
mean? What about
long
their health?
they're a long way from their doctor. Now they do have medical supplies and stuff like that up there with them, but let's face
Yeah,
it,
but
there's
they're
certain health issues that can happen from being up in orbit that time, even in a pressurized capsule.
well, as long as they don't go longer than a year, because astronaut Kelly did a year and he was fine. They're only going to be up there for a couple months. That's a standard mission is like 6 months for astronauts up at the space station.
Mhm.
So I'm not too worried. And plus, they're still astronauts. They're part of the astronaut corps. So whether you're going for 6 months or doing a week flight, it's the same fitness requirements for both. So I think the astronauts are okay
So
in terms
regardless of what it
of
is
health.
we discuss, there's always gonna be the question in my mind of the health. It's just the way my mind works, you know?
But what
It's
about the health
always
though? It's 4 months in
is it
space. We've got to think about it.
deteriorating? Is there something we don't hear? Not to be a conspiracy theorist, but are
But you're gonna
they
be.
yeah, I'm gonna be. But are they alright up there? Or we know they have enough supplies. We know we could get them through. They got food, they got water.
Yeah, it's a space
Mentally,
station.
yeah, but mentally, are they cool? Like,
I mean,
being away
it's
and
that's a contingency, right? They knew that was a
it is a
possibility.
contingency, but that doesn't
That's
mean it's always gonna work.
the ISS. Well, it did. What are you talking about? The ISS is a lifeboat for them. They knew that. That's a contingency. If something were to happen to the capsule, they could seek refuge in the ISS until they were able to fix it. That was the whole point of docking with the ISS versus
Right,
sending them up and then having them do like a deorbit and something go wrong, and you know what I mean?
right.
So it's they
I
plan for it.
just worry that, like, mentally, they're alright because, you know, they're still humans regardless of how highly trained and skilled they are. They're still human beings. That's
Okay,
all I'm saying.
but they're astronauts, brother. They're
Doesn't make
it's
them
not supposed
godlike,
to be.
brother. They're just
No,
astronauts.
but it makes them that they're trained to do this. Their mental fortitude is part of the reason why they're
Okay, and
astronauts.
you're highly trained to be a pilot. I'm highly trained to do what I do, but
Correct.
people still worry about our mental health, correct?
I mean, yeah, but what has you
Alright.
seen anything on the
That's
news that
all I'm
makes
saying. I'm just saying mentally, I hope they're okay.
interesting thought? Okay, that's we
Mhm.
went kind of on a tangent. That's a odd tangent to. They're fine. I'm pretty sure they are. They're still talking about. Oh, that's a beautiful thing about being a part of the ISS too. There's communication with the Earth, so it's not like they're completely isolated out in the middle of space, out of nowhere. It's only a couple months. I'm pretty sure. I gotta look. I think Sunita has already done a mission on the ISS. I think both of them have. So it's not their first rodeo
Mm,
either. I'm pretty sure they both have.
I'm pretty
This
sure they
isn't their
both have
first time.
too. Like,
Yeah, it's it,
the problem was I was reading up the articles, like, after I texted you this, subject, I started doing the art like, reading articles and stuff like that, and then it just consistent interruption, like, consistent.
I'm looking it up. And
Go
what is but what does that have to what?
who?
Let's see. No, what so you said consistent interruption about what?
Reading the articles and stuff, and doing, like,
Okay.
as much research as I normally do on our subject matter. It's been a rough
Uh
couple weeks, bro.
Suni Williams. Well, no, but I mean that's I what does that have to do with the what we're talking about?
Because I want to have something like how they were mentally handling it.
Yes, Suni Williams is an American astronaut, retired U.S. Navy officer, and a former record holder for the most spacewalks by a woman and most spacewalk time for a woman. So yeah, they're fine.
How much time she got in the
This-
EVA?
I don't know.
Oh, it didn't say?
it's no, it's I'm reading like off the short lines here.
Oh,
Um,
gotcha, gotcha.
yeah, so they're fine. You don't need to worry about them, Tommy D. They're fine.
Well,
They've
you
done
know
this
me, I'm
before.
a worrywart.
They've probably already done close to a year in the space station, anyways. Because Mark Kelly did it, and they're obviously they were studying the effects of that for like deep space exploration and stuff as well.
Yes.
But yeah, Suni Williams and hold on, they separated their names for some reason, and Butch Wilmore. Let me look at Butch here. I bet he's a seasoned astronaut too. Yeah, especially if it's a test thing for Boeing. I don't think they'd send up like brand new astronauts. Butch Wilmore. Let's see what he's got. Butch Wilmore. Here comes the internet. Let's see. Is a NASA astronaut, a Navy test pilot, has had 3 space flights, for which was an 11-day space shuttle mission. He's an STS guy. International Space Station, STS-129. He was part of Expedition 41 to the ISS. He's been to the ISS, I think, twice, is what this is saying. So yeah, they're fine. They know they're in their element. I wouldn't worry too much about it.
I'm looking forward to
I'm
see
not
what they're
worried
going to do after the ISS.
We're going to Mars or the moon. We're I don't know what we're doing. It's honestly, I have no idea. We've sent
I
the
don't think
Orion
they put
capsule.
out a definitive release. I know another moon excursion was definitely
Well, yeah,
thrown
because they
out.
sent the
But
Orion capsule around the moon. We already did
hmm
it. They launched the Orion out unmanned, out around and back. So we've already basically done the equivalent of Apollo. Was it
6,
8? I thought it was 8. 8 did the first. 8 was the
it was
no.
8. You're
Yeah,
correct.
8.
You're
Yeah,
correct.
1 through 8 were tests, and then 8 was the first orbit around the moon. Like shot out to the moon, came back, and then
Yep.
Apollo 11 was the
Slingshot it
first.
around the dark side and brought it back.
Yeah, and then 11 was the first official moon landing. So, but yeah, so we'll see. I think they're gonna be fine. Obviously, I'm more worried. I would personally be more concerned about the Boeing capsule. Although it did re-enter okay, so that's a good sign. Even with
hmm
its woes that it had no problem re-entering, which is a positive. But that would be the part that I'm worried about. It's like, okay, cool, they sent it back up. Now what's going to go wrong with it? So as long as they get back to Earth safely, that's what I'm more concerned about.
Yeah, and I'm
But
sure the Boeing engineers, NASA engineers, engineers that oversee the engineers are all over that capsule still,
oh yeah, I
like
mean they need to
checking it.
be.
Like,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, that was a good one. So I think we came to a conclusion that it's not necessarily the third party issue of third party manufacturers making the spacecraft. I think it's the problem that we discussed is the system. The system is the problem where it's
yes,
forcing companies to underbid each other and for cost saving measures versus providing proper funding from the federal government for a space program, which would allow for no corners to be cut and enough funding to create safe capsules, regardless of who actually manufactures them. Right. So that's a good discussion topic. So that concludes episode number 29, Spacecraft by Temu. We do thank you for joining us this week. And if you enjoyed the show, please let us know by rating the show on the respective platform you are watching on. So if you're listening to this on Twitch or, I'm sorry, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, feel free to rate us if you enjoyed the show. If you're watching live, go to Spotify, go to Apple Podcasts, find us and do the same. If you'd like to stay up to date with the show and industry news, follow us on Twitter at Torque and Thrust Talk Show. If you'd like to save the show for on-the-go entertainment and news, follow and turn on notifications for the talk show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Feel free to follow me and Tommy D on TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube. I'm at Captain Bill Official, and Tommy D is at Level Flight Simulations. The next live show will be Friday, September 20th at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. And on behalf of the Torque and Thrust Talk Show, I am Bill.
I am Tommy, and thank you for the compliment, Ash.
Yep, and we will see you next week.